Hey, is that the new Shatters? Hey guys, what is going on? It's me, BakuriBox12 here, and welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God video. So yes, the new Shatters, the rework, is officially out. It's been teased for quite some time. I think we've all been waiting for this for many years now. And in the last month, we've had the opportunity to practice it on testing with the new bosses, enemies, layouts, items, all that good stuff, and it was looking quite promising on there. Upon release, however, there is a bit of mixed reception, and I can't help but agree. Graphics-wise, this is a beauty. Some of the best patterns, sprites, and animations the game has ever seen. The items all look great, tons of enemy variety, many different phases for the bosses. There is a lot to like here. The courtyard has been expanded beyond belief compared to its original iteration. The Sentinel actually moves. The Twilight Archmage does not, but he finally attacks you himself. The Forgotten King I haven't even had a chance to try yet. Testing was inconsistent, and it's, really freaking long. I think we can get away with saying it's the longest dungeon in the game. You don't even have to play it to really know that. Everyone is saying that runs take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on group size, DPS, how well you're focusing bosses. It is still a really new dungeon, and naturally strategies will come out over time. Better optimizations will come out. I mean, I'm sure we all thought the original Shatters was impossible when it first came out, and then we learned all the strategies and it rendered it pretty elementary by comparison, which was sort of the reason why we needed a rework so bad. When the hardest boss of the game at the time of release has a phase where you can stand behind him and never get hurt, I think we might have a problem. But it almost seemed intentional with how many of those spots there were in the original Shatters. And I loved that dungeon. I think the dungeon part of it was great, but it definitely felt like the bosses were only hard when you didn't know how they worked. Jump ahead to post-2018 where bosses are now way more bullet pattern focused, and suddenly a new standard has been set. So I'm willing to wait however long it takes for people to figure out the best ways to do this dungeon. And I'm sure they'll shave many minutes off the max time. Who knows, maybe there's a secret switch somewhere that we haven't found yet that speeds along the whole process. Until then though, we only have current knowledge to base it off of, so that's what I'm going to do. And as it stands, I'm gonna have to agree with the majority. I think this dungeon is too long for its own good. Does that add to its epic legacy? A grand finale dungeon that takes an hour to complete with 3 of the hardest bosses in the game and amazing loot? Yeah, that sounds really good on paper, but realistically, is the game properly respecting your time throughout those 30 to 60 minutes? Is it too bloated? Do enemies take too long to kill? Why is it that there isn't a graphic in-game to show us how many switches we have in the courtyard? That was a really handy tool on testing, and then they took it out the last couple of times. The clearing that it takes to get to second boss is kind of repetitive. Just a series of traditional square rooms. I mean, yeah, it's cool the lore that's going on here, but gameplay-wise, it kind of feels like a step down from the original where we had 3 unique pathways. Really small hallways that made it cramped and kind of scary. The third switch where you had multiple ways of approaching. Take note of the spawns you had, and that's going to dictate how far you can tiptoe towards them. Yes, it was sort of anti-gameplay because you were trying your hardest to not fight anything, whereas now the game is more focused on not having cheats like that and making you actually participate in the content, which is a good thing. But figuring out what the loophole was on each run based on RNG was part of the strategy and therefore part of the fun. At least to me. And then there was the whole secret switch business. If you had a class who could teleport, you didn't even have to clear it out, which was a way of rewarding class variety. But the point is, the dungeon simply feels longer than it needs to be, especially because its loot to difficulty to time ratio doesn't really fit with the current standard. Again, yes, I am prepared for the possibility that players will be able to prioritize runs and execute them much quicker than currently, perhaps invalidating this whole argument, but at this point in time, it does seem like a bit of a stretch. And so for how much time is required to put into it, and how difficult these bosses are. The Forgotten King genuinely looks harder than anything the Lost Halls has to offer. And if I'm not mistaken, this was supposed to be the 3rd hardest dungeon in the game. Maybe they're pushing for a higher difficulty, or maybe they're gonna rework Lost Halls, who knows. What I do know though, is that doing a cultist run in the halls is much easier, shorter, and potentially more lucrative than attempting the new Shatters. When you add everything up, Sentinel, Archmage, Forgotten King, maybe some minion white bags, yeah, that does add up, but at what cost? A casual cult run with a couple of people can take 15 minutes, and you're getting at least a couple of life out of it on average, not to mention pot rooms and the Titan. Now on the flip side, the new courtyard now incentivizes rushing, since you can have your team camp by one of the teleporters, go clear out the rest, and then everybody's happy in just a couple minutes. Which is cool because rushing has always been excluded from endgame content to prevent one guy from rushing past all the danger and then everybody just TPs to boss. This is a nice middle ground of allowing some rushing to happen, but not letting it break the whole experience. Also, I've said before, the Forgotten Sentinel fight fantastic. I can't speak for the Archmage and King very much. I have fought the Archmage a couple of times, haven't beaten him yet. Seems like a very sound fight, difficult but fair. Sebchoof made an excellent video detailing his experience with the Shatters so far, and he nails a lot of solid points that I think most of us agree with. So while I absolutely admire the work that went into making this, and most of it is really top-notch, we went from the bosses being the weakest aspect of the dungeon to it easily being the strongest. The loot is so much better, there's actually a lot of reasons to do this dungeon. Beyond potions, mainly white bags. I think there's like a Deca Ring reskin you can get, but I do think that it's still a few fine-tunings away from being the masterpiece endgame dungeon that it needs to be. Because at this point in time, it's just really long, and it just doesn't match the other content. Like I said, I can do a cult in a fraction of the time, which is much easier, and walk away with better loot than the first two bosses combined. White bags aside, of course. Who knows, maybe the UTs alone are worth it, and this isn't a dungeon that you're supposed to grind for potions. That being said, it is an attack exaltation, and I think most would agree that a void run, which is for mana, is way more efficient. I would say either buff the potion drops in Shatters, make the dungeon shorter, or maybe potion drops need a bit of reworking across the board. Seems like every endgame dungeon is expected to drop life because that's the only potion that is gonna make us want to do it. Since this is the hardest content the game has to offer, we're expected to get the highest level of rewards. So to give us anything less than life, feels like we're being shorthanded. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Shatters should hand out greater life for every boss. Maybe the other dungeons need a bit of a nerf, a downgrade. Maybe we're a little too spoiled with potion drops and UTs and all that. Maybe not, I don't know. In any case, new Shatters is here for us to try. We'll see what comes of it in the next couple of weeks. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright. See ya.